So there's something floating around right now that everybody is talking about appropriately, and that is the Manosphere and all the iterations of the Manosphere. So it's something that all of us need to be paying attention to. Mothers of sons, mothers of daughters, women, other men. Everyone needs to talk about this because it looks like it's growing as a movement, and I think it's pretty influential to a degree, and we'll get to that. But recently people are starting to talk about this a lot because there was a Louis Theroux documentary about it. Have you seen it? And if you have, I think we should talk about it today.
Yes, I have seen it and I have notes.
I have notes. I have something
Yes.
to say. I watched it twice. The first time I watched it, it didn't seem like it went too deep into the disgusting rhetoric. The second time I watched it, I heard a little bit more of it, but I really thought it would be more expose. But I think Louis Theroux did a good job of ingratiating himself enough to get a good exposure of the influencers without pushing it too far. And I think he wouldn't have been able to do that if he was pushing too much of the salacious rhetoric that they're posting.
I agree. Louis Theroux was uncannily endearing. So I think that that helped him to get into the bro circles. He said at the beginning that he was having trouble getting in. I think he finally convinced them that it wasn't going to be a hit piece. And truly, it wasn't a hit piece the way that we would traditionally expect it to be a hit piece. My guess is that people who are watching that, who lean into the Manosphere, are probably going to watch that and think that those bros crushed it. And then the people who don't lean into the Manosphere are going to look at that and say, wow, they were exposed.
Louis Theroux did such a good job of a very kindly and carefully placed question that wasn't attacking, and then he just let the men hang themselves. So about the hit piece, this is one of my many observations about the documentary, is the deep, deep level of suspicion of all of these influencers. They're so suspicious, constantly defensive, when nobody, including Louis, nobody is saying anything that is offending them, but yet they're so defensive. And that has to come from somewhere. I have two theories. One, it comes from their own judgment of themselves. And number two, it comes from their commenters. Probably a little bit of both.
I would say maybe a third one, which is that narcissists tend to project, and they clearly are entering into a space where they are being very aggressive toward other people. So what they're projecting is that other people are going to be aggressive towards them. And I think it's just spiraled into this awful paranoia.
That's a good point. It is very much everything that they accused was something that they did and made money off of. I also think that constant defensiveness and a lot of the other rhetoric was a reflection of deep insecurities.
The manosphere, actually, the way that I heard Louis Theroux define it, didn't necessarily include the entire red pill community. It was kind of a very select group of bro podcasters, and particularly the ones that he interviewed. But I do definitely think that the entire red pill community has been created out of this deep, deep insecurity.
So let's start with a couple of those definitions because I saw many layers. Among the many layers, there was the red pilling, and the red pilling is the reflection of the matrix. They define the matrix as this societal norm that people get trapped into a job and they can never be ultra rich because they're on a salary. And the red pilling is their reflection of the movie The Matrix when they don't want to live in that matrix that's happening in their lives in the real world. Beyond the red pilling, though, I think there are some who have fancy themselves having grown through the red pill period, and now they're into politics, they're into anti-Semitism, and even in one case into religion. So I think the Islamic religion, the MAGA politics, the anti-Semitism, the red pilling, the manosphere, I think those are all slightly different things depending on who you ask. And I think this is intentional because one thing that stood out to me more than anything else in this documentary and a little bit of research I did beyond that was just the significant level of misinformation, lies, and direct contradictions. So I feel like this multiple calling themselves whatever they want to call themselves and then adjusting that definition to what they want on that day is part of this creating contradictions so nobody can actually follow and pin them down to an ideology.
Yes, and that was one of the points that I came away with. One of my main takeaways is that they preach enough truth to make it palatable. They say enough things that are true, and they offer enough positive messaging that it feels welcoming to people who haven't really been exposed to this before. but it's so enmeshed and wrapped up in this toxic ideology. And I think it's incredibly intentional the way that they say enough things that sound true to draw people in.
I only found two things that, with a little bit of pressure testing from my critical thinking skills, could possibly be true and could attract someone to want to follow this ideology if you can set aside all of the misogyny and the hatred and the awfulness. And those two things are that we are built on a society that is meant for the ultra rich to be rich, and unless you change something in your own life, you're never going to be one of those rich people. And even if you do change something, you're probably not going to be that rich person. But that idea of, if you keep working for someone else, you're never going to be rich. That's just the society we're living in, and that's a truth that some people might be attracted by. The other one is that we're living in an attention economy, and that's absolutely true too. That the ability to capture someone's attention, even for 30 seconds, is extremely valuable in our society. But beyond that, I didn't see anything else that was true with any kind of pressure testing. Any little tiny bit of questioning and even repeating it back to these men, and they would crumble.
I found the most interesting kernels of truth coming from the people that followed them. There was a few that were followers of Justin Waller and had run into him at a coffee shop during this interview. And so Thoreau interviewed them as well. One of them had just been homeless and had made the decision to pull himself up by the bootstraps and change his life. And he stumbled upon Justin Waller, and the messaging that he took what had enough truth in it. And the messaging was, no one's going to save you. If you want to change your life, you need to change your own life. You need to be responsible for your own life. And I do think that that's true, especially when we're talking about people who grew up with little or no support at all. They're going to continue to flounder on the assumption that someone else is going to come in and save them. And that's a really appealing message. And I heard them really drawn to that. I think the one guy they interviewed said it multiple times, how I have to fix myself because no one else can do it for me.
And yet, I heard this one as well. This is what they're bought into as that kernel of truth that's surrounded by a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
Because that kid also said he was living in his car and God brought him out of his car, out of living in his car. If he's pulling himself up by his own bootstraps and no one's going to come rescue you, how did his God come and rescue him from that homelessness? That's the part that's just, it falls apart with the least bit of pushing. Yes, you build yourself up and then you give someone else credit for it.
That's an interesting take. And I think that just layers in religion in a way that I don't typically hear most of the bro podcasters using religious language. Some of them do. A lot of them really are very white Christian nationalist vibes, but the messaging and the products that they were selling were not religious.
It's true. And I want to mention something else about this kid who was talking about living in his car. He and the buddy that he was with, the followers, the two of them, believed very distinctly that depression was not a thing. They don't believe in depression.
Yeah.
And that one kid who was living in his car just lost a brother to suicide. How do those things reconcile in your mind? I feel like this contradiction is built in as a way to keep people confused enough to want to get more.
Absolutely. The cognitive dissonance that is built by the conflicting messaging and sometimes even in the same sentence, the messaging conflicting with itself. I do think you're right. The piece of what they're hearing that taps into that confirmation bias, like, yes, I've thought that too, then muddles all of the rest of it. And then they just sort of absorb it all, hanging their hat on the one thing that feels true to them. And then all of the rest of it starts to kind of slowly seep itself in. Well, if I thought that part was true, well, then maybe this other part is true. Maybe this is the piece that I'm missing. Maybe I need to be following these bro podcasters because they're living the life I want to live.
Just the level of contradiction to me, and I think this is, you explained why the contradictions are so important, because you hang on to that truth, and then they have to believe that they're true after a while, otherwise they get this cognitive dissonance. They talk about not being stuck in this matrix of this working for other people. And yet all of these are multi-level marketing schemes, and they're building their own matrix that they're on top of, that they're keeping these followers in their matrix that they're building. So that's a huge contradiction. I feel like the over-the-top performance with wealth. So I might be adding a little bit of my own emotion here, but that over-the-top, the cars and the rings and the watches, it just smacks of drag queen to me. And I don't mean disrespect to drag queens. It's just so incredibly performative. The idea that the followers are following to learn this idea of dominance when the followers become so incredibly submissive. That's a huge contradiction. How do people say, I just believe in everything you're saying because I want to be dominant? That doesn't make any sense. And then the homophobia, so pervasive across the manosphere. You can't be gay, you can't have a kid who's gay. This homophobia was so distasteful. And yet, everything that they do is for the male gaze. It's the money, the cars, the naked women, the gym workout. So if I'm a man and I'm paying money to watch another man sweating in the gym, what does that say? I'm not saying they're gay. I'm just saying that there's this weird disconnect between the homophobia and doing everything for the physical male gaze. Doesn't make any sense.
So can I jump in on that one for a moment? I heard the same thing as well. And if we take sexuality as a spectrum rather than a you are gay or you aren't gay, as rather than a binary,
It is.
I think what's happening is that the pieces of them that are attracted to the power and the allure of the wealth and the money and the dominance of other men, I think is along that spectrum. But at the same time, they're getting this message that being gay is so evil. So they're running in the opposite direction. Like you said, at the same time, it's completely for other men. This entire sphere has almost nothing to do with women outside of what women as their property can do for them.
So let's go down that road a little bit, the women. So Louis Theroux, I think on purpose left out the women's perspective because that's not what the Manosphere is about. What I saw, though, was the wives and girlfriends, which the terms wives and girlfriends were used interchangeably, which means sort of property, and I own you without you having to commit to me or me to commit to you. That's a whole discussion in itself.
But also, by doing that, they don't have to commit, but they're saying wives because they know that that's not a popular thing to be unmarried in this sphere. To own the wife is the thing to do. And so they know on some level. I found them a lot of times backpedaling on some of their stances. And this interchangeability between wives and girlfriends, I feel like, is a piece of that backpedaling. Like, well, no, I mean, it's not, well, not actually my wife, but I mean, like I say wife because it keeps people off my back.
They might also think that that's what the woman wants, is to be married. And he's not going to do that because it's commitment financially and emotionally, which he's unwilling to give. But maybe that's what she wants. I think they're manipulating to try to keep them around. I feel like putting kids in them is trapping them in this one-way monogamy. My perspective on the women, they seemed to be in it for themselves. They weren't in it for the men. They weren't buying what the men were saying. All of them who were there were trying to milk off of the clout and get their own clout or get their own money. They knew who the men were almost universally. There was one woman who was in a bikini with, they created this house of 15 women who were just going to be doing an OnlyFans thing. But the woman who was representing them, she was in a bikini, really nice woman. She knew exactly who Harrison was. Louis asked her, what do you think? And she's like, yeah, I know who he is. She had a great answer for it. She wasn't fawning on him. And then she said something about, well, you have male followers, so of course this is what you're going to hear. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I felt like the women in this documentary, their behavior was because they wanted to get something for themselves out of it, for good or bad. I don't feel like they were doing it to support their men.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I don't think that they were as dumb as they pretend to be, because that's what they need to do in order to get on these shows. I think we're most specifically talking about the women that are engaged in the podcasting world and who are on the podcasts, letting themselves be humiliated and demeaned. And I think that they know it and are willing to trade that for the clout and the following and the money and the attention that they get from it.
The intentionality with which they did that, I don't necessarily respect someone who makes money off of OnlyFans. That's their choice. I wouldn't do that. But I respect their intentionality and I respect their going after what they wanted, not being led by a severely misogynistic man.
I have no problem with OnlyFans because it's completely consensual, with the exception of if there are illegal things or underage people. But consenting adults participating in this, those women are entrepreneurs. Now, they're using a commodity that depreciates a lot faster than some other things, which is their body. But I respect their hustle. But like you said, I also really respect the intentionality with which they put themselves into those positions. And here's the problematic piece, though, for me, is that the other men who are watching these are starting to believe that that's how all women are. And they're starting to go out into the world and behave as if all women are property, are dumb, are only in it for the clout, because they got that. They got that too. And so the men that are following are treating women in the real world as if they are those women, and they're not.
So that's the issue I have with, I don't know, what I would categorize sex workers or porn workers or OnlyFans, and I don't want to lump them all together. I know that there's differences, and this is not my arena, so I have no right to have an opinion. But there is a consequence of that behavior on women who are not part of that, and little girls too. And as you're saying, the men who watch that constantly then think everybody's going to behave that way. The women in the supermarket are going to behave that way, and it's just not real life. But I appreciate the hustle, and I appreciate you go to get what you need as a woman.
You said it earlier, it wouldn't be my choice. I would have a very hard time allowing myself to be that badly demeaned in such an explicit and public way. The trade-off wouldn't be worth it for me.
I think we're very privileged that we
Yeah.
don't have to look at it as an option. So I
Yeah.
completely openly admit that. If I had to feed a kid, I don't know what I wouldn't do for that kid.
Absolutely. Oh, you're 100%. That's part of why I don't have a problem with the OnlyFans and, strip clubs or whatever. If that's, except for the potential for some of those industries to make it easier for abuse of the workers. That's hugely problematic. So in that sense, the entire industry is ripe with abuse, and that is not okay with me, which is part of why the OnlyFans feels less dangerous, because it's very distant. It's all online. It's completely consensual. You don't even have to show your identity. And so there's a lot less opportunity, I think, for physical and sexual abuse to happen. But I don't really know that much about the industry as a whole to know if that's true or not. And maybe there are other ways that people can become really badly abused doing that. I want to talk about the girlfriends and the wives. They all said, yeah, we know who they are, and I just don't want to know about their other life. I don't care. It's none of my business as long as he's coming home to me and providing. I call bullshit on that approach. I don't think those women really truly want that in a life partner. Now, they might have, I feel weird calling out names, but the woman who was with Justin Waller seemed very clear that this is the arrangement, and what I'm getting out of it is I get to be a stay-at-home mom and live the life. Okay, girl, you go, you do you. Angela, however, who was Myron Gaye's girlfriend, you could see it all over her face that this is not what she wants in a life partner. And in fact, she did leave him after, or they separated. I don't know how it worked.
A few days after the documentary dropped, Angie posted a video saying, yes, they did break up, or she stopped seeing him, whatever the situation was, but that she actually has a boyfriend now who's not misogynistic and is treating her really well. So she went out to the public and said, look, I'm okay. Thank you for caring for me. I'm okay.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was that she left him because she was done with that, or if he dumped her because she was done with that. He wanted the nymph virgin live-in maid mommy.
Live-in maid, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm concluding from my own self that she broke up with him because he looked like he really liked her.
Yeah, it hit him hard. You could tell. Yeah. You could see it even as he was explaining. It's like she wanted children, and I can't give that to her right now. If he had chosen to give her his monogamy and a family, he would have lost everything else. He would have lost his entire platform.
As with most other things that are mischaracterizations / misinformation / lies, I feel like that was another lie. I think that was one conversation they had at one point and they disagreed about that. She wanted something different from him altogether. Respect. Maybe having this girlfriend / wife that he's devoted to doesn't fit his image.
I wonder if the one night stands that they seem to be so proud of are at all satisfying. Like on a deep level.
Or real.
That's a good point.
There was one comment, I believe it was Justin Waller, who immediately launched into defensiveness saying that, no, I really am happy. People are saying, meaning what he thinks about himself, people are saying that I must not be happy because I'm seeking all these other women. And no, I really like it. So A, he's being defensive about it. B, he knows darn well that it looks like he's unhappy because he has to go constantly seek all of this physical validation.
It not only looks like they're unhappy, but they know they're unhappy. Otherwise, why are they striving so hard to be something else? That felt real to me, that all of them were trying so hard to be something else than they were.
Than
And
they had been.
than they
Yes.
had been. And the somebody else that they're becoming is also not satisfying, because those external things don't make a person happy. I don't think they're happy. And also, how can you spew that much hatred and also live a life that at its core is joyful? Like, you can't have both. The toxicity and the hatred that they're spewing on other people, it's like ink, like it's going to get on them too.
Especially for as many hours of their day they're spewing these things. I feel like there were two categories, and maybe it's a spectrum, but I think there were two distinct categories of why they're spewing such toxicity and such hatred and such awfulness. One of them was the category of the men who actually believe it, and they think it's going to make their life better to shit on other people. There was one person, though, in the other category, on the other side of the spectrum, who knows what a shitty job he's doing, and he knows it's toxic, and he doesn't want anything to do with it. He doesn't want anything to do with the porn, and he thinks porn is bad for men. He thinks the OnlyFans are not good for the women. He knows all of that, and he expresses all of that, and he says, I'm just doing it for the money.
I think he had more self-awareness. I think all of them on some level know that they don't believe it. I don't think any of them believe what they're saying, because ultimately what they are doing this for is for money, and it's for selling things. And I think Justin Waller was selling coaching, and Harrison Sullivan was selling financial advice, investment advice. Like, all of them were selling something. And this hatred, this rage baiting is just a way to draw people in, so that down the road, then those people will invest and spend a lot of money on them, on their products, on their bullshit. So on some level, they know that the things that they're saying aren't true, but they do get the attention that they need in order to get the money.
So there were a couple of things that, well, more than a couple of things that made me skeptical. One of them was Harrison Sullivan was showing on one of his TikToks how much money he made before he got out of bed. But his phone was severely cracked, like long time cracked. Not like it broke this morning, but cracked. Where's your backup phone? Where's your assistant who can go out and get you a new phone? Because showing how much you make on a phone that's broken, not a good look. And then when Justin Waller was talking about all the beautiful women that he pulls, in Miami they're tens, but in your small town they might be eights or nines, and you can go get them too. When he's showing these beautiful women, they were AI generated images. Where are all the beautiful women that he's actually showing us? I can get an AI image too. So it's just this level of untruth.
And I think that that's probably the part for me that was the hardest to swallow, is not necessarily even just that they were evil enough to just spew that hatred, but that the people who are following them do believe what they're spewing. And that's, for me, what is really dangerous, because those people have forfeited their ability to do critical thinking in favor of letting these other men dictate for them how they should live.
I came away from the documentary feeling a little bit less uncomfortable than I thought I would be. Remember, I told you I was going to go watch the movie with a big blanket and a stuffy. I didn't feel as bad about it as I came out of it. Probably because, and this is my opinion, the rhetoric that they were spewing was so ridiculous and so far over the top and so hard to connect with on any kind of level that I thought, if we as a society start raising people who can critically think at all, they're going to not fall for this. I know some people are, and I know it's a big thing right now. I just feel like it was just a little bit too ridiculous. When Louis would go up and with his very nice kind face go up and say, "Huh, is that what you believe?" And their argument completely fell apart and they backpedaled. That doesn't even take critical thinking. It just takes one saying, "Huh, really?" And that's it, and it falls apart. So anyone who can say, "Huh, really?" will not fall for this ridiculous, extremist, over the top rhetoric.
I also came away with that. I found it more comical than intimidating, and a little bit pitiful. So I came away with the
Yes.
same exact thing. Like, as a woman in this culture that has been around for a while, they looked like little itty bitty baby man children having temper tantrums. That's what it looked like to me. And I kind of wanted to just go,
Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Who hurt you?
Okay, so that's the thing. We talk about them as little boys. Every single one of them had significant trauma, and some of them pointed pretty obviously to sexual trauma in their past. Sneeko, I'm sure he was abused. I mean, it's just so apparent from looking at it from a mother's perspective. What happened to you? They were not born with this hatred and misinformation and lies. They were taught this, and they were taught this through their childhood trauma, and this was the way that they chose to deal with it.
One of the things that they did say was that a lot of the broadcasters grew up in one-parent households and typically were mom-only households. Now, I did not want to hear that because the message that's going to come out of that is that when moms raise kids by themselves, they fuck it up really bad and you end up with kids this damaged. And I don't think that was the point at all. I think that there is other trauma, including having been abandoned by fathers, which does not mean it's the mom's fault that they were raised this way. Or perhaps they did have mothers that sucked. But that doesn't mean that every single mother on the planet is fucking up their kids to this degree.
It's a very typical thing that if something goes wrong in a relationship, it's the mother's fault. It's the woman's fault. It's very typical of that. So I would say it's not even that it's not the mother's fault that the kids were screwed up, although an abusive mother, an alcoholic mother, a missing mother. I think one of the podcasters said that they almost ended up in foster care because the mother was burning down houses or something. So that's a chaotic mother, and that's going to cause some trauma. But the issue was not the single motherhood. The issue was the abandoning, neglectful father.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Yes. And or the sexual abuse that they experienced.
But my point was that they don't come out of the womb like this. This is taught behavior. It's taught ideology. Learned ideology.
So let's talk about this ideology. So one of the fundamental core pieces of this ideology is that men used to have the life. And ever since women started demanding things like the ability to have their own checking accounts and an equal partnership and getting paid, dollar for dollar. As soon as women started making those demands, this culture turned to shit. And everything for white men turned to shit. This is so dangerous and so ridiculous. I cannot stand this ideology that says that men are being harassed and oppressed. The reality is, men have been so privileged that now that they are starting to lose the edge of that privilege, they're feeling like it's oppression. And it's like, y'all, that is the definition of privilege right there, is that you can feel a little bit of pressure and now all of a sudden you're the victim. Like, come on, really, like, do some work. Do some of the internal work. Take a look at your own shit. I've had conversations like this with young men that are in my sphere of influence, and some of them truly, genuinely believe that being a white man is the hardest demographic to be right now in this world.
I have experienced that as well from white men. Do you know how hard it is to be a wealthy white heterosexual man right now? No. No, we've never experienced anything hard, so I don't know what that's like. Please share it with me. Louis had a really good statement for it. He said, the entitlements of manhood have been challenged. Not even taken away. Challenged. Bring it up. Are you aware that you have all the money and power in the world? Well, oh, no. Let's burn everything to the ground now because you're asking that question. That's not healthy adult behavior.
This is kind of a detour in the conversation, but I was reading up today. The book that I was reading suggested, I think rightfully so, that back when Rockefeller was starting to make his money, he recognized that people coming out of the public education system were beginning to be critical thinkers. And he needed them to not be critical thinkers. He needed them to be worker bees. So he intentionally poured his money into the public education system to shape it in such a way that critical thinking went out the window, and that this model of you sit down all at the same time, you do all of the same tasks, you do what you're told, you listen to the teacher, you follow directions, you get rewarded for what you give. That all of that was intentional to help the billionaires on their way up. And what it did was it made an entire multiple generations of public school children come out of the education system with no ability to be critical thinkers, unless they were also exposed to critical thinking elsewhere. And that makes me wonder if this manosphere is a byproduct of that public education system refusing to teach critical thinking skills. And then when they come out of it and feel a little bit of pressure, instead of thinking it through, instead of trying to put themselves in someone else's shoes, instead of taking a big picture look, like a 10,000-foot view of what's actually happening in the world, they just go straight to victim. Maybe being victimized as children has just made them continue to see themselves as victims. I don't know.
It's a weird juxtaposition of victim, though, because victim is a weak place. And I think that while they might feel like the world is happening to them, I also don't feel like they're able to put on that victim mentality. They want to make other people victims, even though they're the ones it's happening to. It's a weird contradiction.
It feels a little bit to me like a schoolyard bully was probably the kid that was getting his ass beat at home. And so I feel like they've told themselves this story that they are getting beaten in the real world. And the only response to that is to beat down everybody else.
When Harrison Sullivan and some of his followers were baiting an older man to come and meet a 15-year-old girl, and they ended up beating him up, I thought that was a very strange thing. That idea of, we're going to spew all this hate, we're going to make women look like objects, we're going to talk about dating young women, beautiful women, and then we're going to bait and beat up someone who falls for that.
That was very weird and disturbing.
Immediately after that, Harrison Sullivan had a genuine look of upset on his face. It was down to his core. He was disturbed. And then within a couple of hours, he had clipped the entire thing for content. That's cognitive dissonance right there. Before the documentary, he had populated his home with contest winners. The guy who won the Jeep and the guy who won this and the guy who won that. These are people, the fans of his, followers, who he flew in to fill out his universe. So he probably didn't know them very well. But he's the one feeding them this ideology that made them go and do that to this person.
I think that that's a piece too that really is going to be needing some scrutiny, is that I think that this world that they are building is not the world they actually want to live in, but they are creating for themselves no exit plan, no off ramp to this world that they're building. And so the only thing that they can do is just keep leaning in, because there's no way to come out of that. But I don't really think genuinely that they actually want to live in the world that they're creating with their rhetoric.
But they don't have any other options. They're so young. What, are they going to drop out and go to college? Drop out of their podcasting and go to college? Ideally, that would be great. But you're right. There is no exit plan for them. They're just going to live in this world and build this world and swirl in this toxicity of this world that they're creating. Until what? Until people stop following them?
If you are liking our content, please like and subscribe and comment. We would love to hear what you have to say.
I saw a clip of Nick Fuentes recently, and he was listening to the comments. He's got audio reading of the comments, and he's leaning back in this chair like this, and he's going, "My followers are so stupid. They're so dumb." And I think because he's got a little bit of age on him, he's been doing this for so long, I think he's finally started to recognize that the world that he's created and the people he's surrounded himself with are really fucking stupid people. And he doesn't really want to be near those people anymore. I think he genuinely wanted to do something bigger with his life, and this is what he ended up with.
So Nick Fuentes wasn't part of the documentary, but I've always felt like he was not believing his own words. He was doing it for content and clickbait. And now that he's growing up, he's like, okay, now what am I going to do? I can't keep doing this. This doesn't feel right. I'm becoming an adult. I don't want to be doing this.
I think that Nick Fuentes is a great image of what the future of these younger broadcasters are going to be doing down the road. I mean, I saw the cognitive dissonance already irritating Harrison.
Right.
He was very clearly disturbed by being faced with spewing things that he doesn't actually believe and supporting things with money that he thinks are in real life disgusting. Like that he was already starting to feel the pressure of that cognitive dissonance. They also said that after the documentary, he went back to France, I think, and got arrested for the crimes that he had committed. And he
Right.
never had to do that. He never had to go back there. I'm wondering if that was a part of the cognitive dissonance catching up with him, and the pressure of having to run finally was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to go, well, face it. And the consequences were almost nothing. He didn't actually hurt anybody. So I think he finally just got like, okay, I do have to live on this planet a long time. So let's get this one taken care of. We'll see. Time will tell if he continues to spew that same nonsense or if he decides like, no, this is tough. Because also when he's standing there with his mom, who very clearly was in on the grift,
Yes.
but at the same time, she didn't like everything that he was saying. And when he had to
No.
say those things in front of her, you could tell it was harder for him to do when she was there. It was harder.
He backtracked. I wonder if it was that last exchange between Harrison's mother and Harrison and Louis, because Harrison was remarkably good at keeping his cool. And his way of keeping his cool was to make the other person in the exchange lose their cool. And so he was trying to do that by bringing up Jimmy Savile and all of this. And he was trying to get Louis to lose his cool, and Louis didn't. And then Harrison didn't know what to do with that because most of his followers would have lost their cool already. And he started to get upset, and he raised his voice, and I hadn't seen him lose it before. And maybe that was part of this awakening that he's going through, to go back and face the charges and not be homophobic in front of his mother, you know.
I hope so. I really do hope that some of these young men come to their reckoning. Like, I hope that they develop enough self-awareness and integrity. Now, I mean, we know some very, very, very old narcissists that have made their way up through the ranks that have never had an awakening or an awareness and are fucking us over right now because of their whole little, big baby man-child temper tantrums. So it's possible, maybe they never do, but I don't know. I look at Nick Fuentes, I look at Benny Johnson. He's not come to any awareness. He's like almost 40, and he's still spewing, not only spewing the nonsense, but using the language of Gen Zs to do it. That was one of the final takeaways that I wanted to discuss today, was that I went away from this documentary feeling like the whole Manosphere is an event of the extinction burst of patriarchy. I really felt like they were trying so hard to make a thing happen, right? Like, make fetch happen. They want to make this world back to the world where men had power and men could this and men could that. And they're just not living in like the real world right now. They want all of those things, and at the same time they want women in their lives, but women aren't buying it anymore. And even the women that are appearing to backslide into this patriarchy, this kind of trad wife, whatever thing it is, I don't really think that a lot of those women actually believe it, and or the women that believe it are kind of also so deeply claimed by the patriarchy that they can't see it. So there might be some women who are really genuinely think that they're doing the right thing by buying into this trad wife patriarchy role that they're playing. I don't think most American or Canadian women are them. I think most women nowadays are like, I'm gonna go be a doctor now. I'm gonna go solve a physics problem that's going to help save millions of lives. Like that's what women are doing. There's no going back. But I feel like this effort to try to make it happen is part of the extinction burst.
I wonder if this extinction burst would look any different if it were a different regime in the United States and lots of places. I think there's a sort of a global political last gasp to try to hang on to patriarchy across the world. What I noticed interestingly was this is not a US problem. This is Spain, France, this is UK. Many of them were from the UK. It's not exclusively a US problem. So I don't want to attribute it to the US regime, but I think globally there is this push toward conservatism and trying to take back masculinity and not call it toxic masculinity. But I wonder if in some universe, if Kamala Harris had been elected in the US, if this manosphere would be able to foster and grow the way that it has been able to lately, because at least two of the podcasters on the documentary bragged about having Barron Trump as a follower. And it's just another kid, right?
I think it's a chicken or the egg problem. I think that the Trump regime happened because the manosphere is happening, but the manosphere is also happening because Trump allowed people to be their worst selves. I think it all rises up together. I don't know if we can necessarily determine which is causative, but I think all of it together was inevitable that Kamala Harris wasn't going to win this election because the extinction burst is having its last little got it. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And the thing that has been really weighing on me in the last couple of months and even years is how, not just how deep this goes in all of our institutions, government, education, entertainment, politics, finance, but also how long this has been in the works. So do you remember there was I guess they're not that far out of the news, but the Duggar family, when they first came on the air, and it was like, oh, that's weird. There's a family that has a real lot of kids. And now we know how incredibly dysfunctional that whole system was and is. But what I didn't realize when it first came on the air was that that lifestyle was prevalent among white Christian nationalists already. And we were just starting to see it on television because that was part of the effort of the white Christian nationalist movement to infiltrate media and to infiltrate culture. Because one way that you do that is you desensitize people to the weirdness of it so that it seems normal. So when those kids, those multitudes of kids are being raised up and homeschooled, the boys are being homeschooled to enter politics and to enter finance and to enter these arenas with this ideology. And so the people who are now young adults and adults have been in this since before they were born. Like their parents were young people when this intentional effort, which culminated with Project 2025, I think, was their hope that would be the final push and we could just get rid of all of this woke liberalism and go back to the time when men were men. And I don't even actually think that the men in those positions of power truly believe that women are inferior in the way that they describe it. I don't think that they truly believe that women aren't as smart and that women aren't capable. I think they're trying to make women believe that they're not capable and that they're not smart. But I think these men know very clearly that if women were to continue on the trajectory that we're on right now, that we would very quickly overtake them in all of those arenas. And they can't have it. They know that women are at least as good as, if not better, in a lot of those arenas. And that's why they're fighting so hard. It's not because they actually think that women are inferior.
When Justin Waller was talking to Louis Theroux on his balcony and he said, look around you, everything was built by men, engineered by men, invented by men. It's just so untrue.
Not true.
But to say this over and over again without any kind of fact or fact checking or critical thinking about it, people are going to say, oh, you're right, everything is built by men, when it's just not true. So I feel like your attempt at apologizing, or you feeling the need to apologize for saying women are as good as men, we need to let that go.
Yeah,
it's not a competition. It's not a competition. We don't need to be as good as men. We as humans need to do our best. Period. That's it. Who cares if cement was invented by a man or a woman? It doesn't matter. It shouldn't be a thing that pits us against each other.
And that's the ultimate expression of privilege, is that it does have to become something about competition. And I would say this fierce competition is not only a manosphere thing, but it's also a narcissism thing. Everything is me against you in those spheres. And the rest of the world, at least our culture in the Western Hemisphere, we don't care that much about investing energy in being better than you. Like, we just want to be
No.
us. Like, we just want to do life. And it's incredibly jarring to live amongst people that are operating as if you're the enemy in all things. And all they need to do is figure out how to be at least a step ahead of you, if not more. There's no way that the community at large benefits from that kind of competition mindset. We benefit
agree.
from collaborative mindset. The manosphere is not collaborative. Maybe that's part of why they're so paranoid too, is because they know that the other men that they've attracted into their spheres feel the same way, that it's me against you.
Well, let's review some of the things that allowed the rise of this manosphere, red pilling, incels. Ironically, the cultural shift that empowered more women, LGBTQ, people of color, that is empowering them and threatening this entitlement of white men. I think that's the first thing. The social shift that we can actually say what's on our mind now, even if what's on our mind is very toxic and terrible. And three, I think the biggest thing is social media, where any old body can have a microphone. And as long as you're a good salesman and you're slick and you can give enough contradictions and enough cognitive dissonance to hook people in, any old person can be an influencer in this day and age.
Yeah.
Like, nobody would have given Harrison Sullivan a TV show, for example, back in the
No.
80s.
That places a person's value on their ability to bullshit other people. And that's
Right.
not a
Right.
great place to
That's what social
start.
media does. So can you give me some evidence that this is the last gasp of male privilege?
I'll bring it right back to my very personal experience of having watched this thing. I was terrified going into this. I was like, this is going to piss me off. I'm going to be so mad about this. And when I finished watching it, when my reaction to that was, "Ugh, those poor little man-childs." Like, I just
Yeah,
feel
can I give
so,
you a
like, I
hug?
know, I just want to give you a lollipop and make it better. When that's my gut reaction to that entire thing, that tells me that there are enough of us, because I know I'm not alone in this, that are not taking this seriously. Not that we're not paying attention to the dangers, because that we have to take seriously. But the messaging, not taking that seriously at all. So I feel like just my own gut reaction to that was one of many ways that I feel this extinction burst is about to pop. The release of the Epstein files, I think, is a huge crumbling of this privileged world. The people at the top know that their day is coming and they're scared. And I feel like the reactions that we're getting from those people, this reluctance to let the information out, this kind of obstinance when they're faced with the reality of having to let that out, and the complete and utter silence from every person that may have been involved in some sort of way, I think is that entire world recognizing that it's about time to pay the piper. Like, their time is coming and they know it and they feel it and they're getting more and more desperate. So the coming toppling of the billionaire class, which I now will call the Epstein class, I think is evidence that this extinction burst is coming. So the other piece that I feel like is a part of the extinction burst is a series of legislations over the past decades. Legislations and movements. Me Too being one of them. I think Me Too broke open the secret of sexual abuse that up until Me Too happened, we didn't have a voice for it. Nobody believed women. Nobody believed girls. And even if there was some truth in what they were saying, it didn't matter. It was just rape. Whoa. I think the Me Too movement woke up a lot of women. And today's young women grew up with Me Too as a reality already in their lives. Like, for us, it was a thing that happened later in life. But for the young girls that grew up with it already, this is not okay, being on the table from their childhoods, I think is huge. I think that gay marriage actually is a huge indicator that the extinction burst of the patriarchy is going to happen, because you give that many people a taste of what it feels like to be equal and free, they're not going back. It's like putting toothpaste back in the tube. Like, those people are not going back into the shadows. And those of us who are allies are not going to let that happen to them. And then when the trans community started to actually have a voice, I think that was part of what pushed the Manosphere to be more vocal, and the Trump endorsed Manosphere to just say the worst things of their worst selves, because the trans community was just a hair too far for their brains to comprehend like what is happening in this world, because they have no ability to do any critical thinking or empathy and to actually stand in the shoes of another person and understand what their life is like. So once those things became mainstream, I think it's over. It's over for them because we're not going back.
You're absolutely right. And I think ironically, social media is one of the things that's allowing us to not go back, because we're sharing our experiences without a big filter. Back in the day, it was very difficult to find people who thought like we thought. We had to find them in our communities, in our activities, in our school, in our church, whatever it was. We had to go find those people. And sometimes in the community that we were in, we couldn't find people who were like us. And so we thought, okay, I must be the only one who thinks this way. And I tried to adapt. Humans adapt to their environment, and they adapt to that way of thinking that's in their community. And oftentimes when that's centered on the church, you think like a church person. And now that we have social media, and I can see 100 people before I get through breakfast, 100 different people who I never would have been exposed to before. And I can hear voices that reflect what I believe, and therefore validates what I believe, for good or for bad. It validates what we believe, but I can hear a variety of voices instead of just following what my immediate community tells me I should think. And that's really liberating, so people can find themselves. And I feel like this trans revolution is one of the best things that could have happened to our society. And I feel like there's a bit of a threat in the trans community to the toxic masculine community, because they don't know how to control trans people. Because you're a man too, but you're a woman, you're a man. And this idea of not really understanding or knowing what to do with it, I think that really threatens someone who really wants to control other people. That's not a group that one is going to be able to easily control.
I think it's not just the men's inability to control the trans community. I think that they're looking at the trans community being wholly and authentically themselves in a way that they never could be and never could imagine that they ever could be. And I think that they're massively jealous and envious that other people are just living their best damn lives while they're over here stewing and spinning in their anger and their hatred and their stupidity.
This came out really clearly to me in the Manosphere documentary, that the men in that podcast were not comfortable in their own skin. They were fighting so hard every single day to build an image and to put the clothes on and to put the car on and be something that they thought was what they wanted to be, but not authentically themselves. None of them looked authentically themselves, especially the guy who couldn't say things in front of his mother or couldn't say things in front of his girlfriend. I mean, those are people that are closest to you in your life, and you can't even be yourself around them. Then how do you be yourself around you? And this inability to authentically be oneself, that person would be ultimately threatened by someone who is willing to go and be authentically themselves by changing gender or being in between and being a transgender person. I mean, to me, that is the ultimate of power and strength and authenticity and bravery, to be who you actually are in such an outward way. And I feel like these men who are manosphere influencers chase something that they don't even want.
I feel a little bit of hope in that the people that follow them, it's not going to take them a long, long time to figure out that the bullshit that they're being fed is not going to work for them in the same way. Their followers are not going to have the cars and the women and the money and the houses and all the things. At some point, those people are going to be like, wait a minute, wait, just a minute, back the chain up. Like, you said that if I do X, Y, and Z, then my life is going to look like this, and my life looks nothing like this.
It's multi-level marketing. It's a pyramid scheme. It's nothing more than that.
I think it'll topple
not
like
all
one.
of the followers are not all going to get rich. Most of them are not going to get rich.
Most of them are not. And you can only follow somebody so far when the things that they're promising fail to come to fruition again and again and again and again. At some point, that comes crumbling down on them.
I hope so, but there's also a lot of mental manipulation that I've already sunk 3 years into following this person. And just because the money's not there yet doesn't mean it won't be right around the corner. Don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle kind of thing. So I hope that the realization of this is never going to happen for you sinks in sooner rather than later. But I did notice that there was a lack of alcohol and drug community. It seemed like a very sober audience. I was surprised by that. I thought it would be a very big drug culture, and there was none of that. They stopped serving alcohol at the Myron Gaines podcast. I noticed the Myron Gaines podcast also had significant visual references to Grand Theft Auto Vice City. A lot of the imagery was right out of the game. Without incriminating myself, I really love that game. I can't explain it. But I was mad that he was taking that imagery of one of my favorite games and making it about something negative.
I was also struck by how culty this all feels. And you had mentioned something earlier about how much invested people are that have already invested 3 years. That a lot of that is very cultish behavior. And not only do you invest so much of your time, but you invest so much of yourself that to extract yourself from that is not only admitting failure, but it's having to face the reality that you were duped. That's one of the main reasons why people don't leave cults, because their brain can't yet process that it's all been a lie.
The idea of Manosphere came around in the 70s and 80s. Social media made it catch fire. Typically, a cult leader is so good at what they do that everything is the talent they have to keep people in that cult. And I feel like the easy appearance of money, the fitness culture, the youth of these people, they're not good at it yet. And I feel like that's one of the reasons people are going to get out of this cult quicker, is because these influencers are not yet that good at being cult leaders.
That's a good point.
They're not separating their followers from their friends.
I think the echo chamber serves to isolate people. The echo chamber serves to get you to give up your own self in favor of what everybody else is doing and saying and thinking. Like everything else, cult is a spectrum. So this might not be like Children of God level cult, but it's definitely got some culty elements to it. The only reason I find that relevant is because it makes extracting yourself from that so much more difficult and so much more psychological. Like there's psychological damage that's being done to these young men that is going to make it harder for them to wake up and live differently.
And some of these influencers, especially in Europe, they had followers who were 15, 16 years old. I mean, young people who knew exactly who they were, picked them out on the street, celebrated them, treated them like heroes.
They didn't all seem real happy about the average age of their followers.
Oh, only because of Louis. Only because they were on a documentary.
Because they were faced with it. They're like, no. No, my followers are men. And they're like, yeah, no, actually, your followers are
little
like
boys.
14 and 15. And I feel like they had like a little blip of humanity in them going, oh, shit, am I helping shape these young men? Because it's one thing to be doing this to men where you go like, you're all grown up, you can make your own choices. But when you realize that you're doing this to young people.
I also initially felt that it was a sliver of shame, and I don't think that's actually what it was. I think there might have been a little bit of that in there, but it was more embarrassment that their robust following of these fitness bros were 15-year-old boys. That's what I thought, that they were embarrassed, that it was so easy to lead a 15-year-old. It's not as easy to lead a group of politicians and Baron Trumps and things like that, just little kids.
I know for a fact that I have young men in my life who are, if not fully red-pilled, influenced by the messages that we saw in this Manosphere documentary. So my takeaway is that I can't fix Harrison or Justin or Myron or Sneeko. I can't fix them. And I can't fix the men in my life, but I certainly can also be a counter influence to the messages that they're hearing. And so for me, that's the work I now have ahead of me, is how do I approach this in such a way that those young men in my life can actually hear it and not feel defensive about it. And so I think that's what I really am working towards, is approaching these conversations with some compassion and without judgment, and instead coming at it with modeling what a healthy relationship, what a healthy woman, what a healthy young man looks like in the real world. So that's the work that I'm going to be doing. We only have influence over our own spheres. And so that's what I'm taking away, is that there's some work to be done, and I'm going to go do it.
I would challenge the fact that we can only have influence on our own spheres. I would say that it takes a village. The village needs to get up right now and start taking care of our boys and preventing them from being susceptible to this kind of thing. So I have a 12-year-old son, and I was so afraid to watch this documentary thinking, what is my son going to be facing, and what do I have to do to identify the right messages and the wrong messages? But it really is, in my mind, about the community. If he watches 6 hours of YouTube and he's on the wrong side of it and he hears the Manosphere part of it, and then he goes to a hockey practice and a coach who he has known since he was 5 years old says something to him, that coach's word is going to mean so much more even than those 6 hours of a stranger yapping at him on YouTube. But we have to set up for our communities, be the influence for all of the people you know in your community, be the good influence for these kids.
If you are liking our content, please like and subscribe. It's free. It helps the algorithm. And if not for us, do it for the dogs.
Thank you.